Back to the show. It is 8:06. Good morning, Northwest Missouri. Good morning, Midwest America. I hope your day is going exactly as you planned. We've been talking a bit about oil and the Strait of Hormuz, and now we're going to bring in Alan Mendenhall. He's an author, a lawyer, a critic, a professor, a senior advisor, an associated scholar, a policy advisor, a visiting fellow. Did I miss any titles, Alan?
Just one is fine.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being here. I know that you were focusing on the Strait of Hormuz, took a little jaunt over to Germany. We can talk about that in a bit. But we were talking about the fact that we've lost, according to oilprice.com, $50 billion of lost supply. And they don't know that we won't be feeling these repercussions for years. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah. So before the war, so late 2026, the economy was booming. You had the S&P and the Dow hitting record highs, and gas prices were low. In fact, oil was at, $65 to $70 a barrel at the time, and we were paying, $2.90 at the pump. Compare that to today, where we're at $4 a barrel and $4 a gallon at the pump, and about $91 a barrel. So prices have gone up quite a bit. I think we're possibly going to see them go up even more if the strait doesn't finally get open. And it's been up like roughly $30 to $50 a barrel now. So I don't see that. I don't see that coming down until this conflict is resolved. And of course, it doesn't show any real signs of progress at the moment. I think this morning there were 2 ships seized by Iran's Revolutionary Guard, and one was Panamanian, the other one was Liberian, and then there was a third ship that was actually fired upon, and this was kind of in retaliation for the United States seizing a ship last week. Of course, we had the Strait of Hormuz announced open on Friday, and then Saturday closed, and so markets are really erratic right now. They respond to all this news on what's going on in Iran, and it changes day to day.
So here's the question, and I completely understand if you don't know. I didn't talk to you about this question before. But this is something that I've been asked, and I gave an answer that was an answer like I don't really know, but I'm going to say something. So when you see these disruptions in the market for oil, you see gas prices go up. The question I've got is, why are gas prices going up when it costs just as much to refine it as it did before?
I think the main reason is 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So we're talking about a major choke point here. If the strait closes, then oil prices are going to spike fast. The other thing is China, and oil is a very global product, right? So China was the largest purchaser of both Venezuelan oil and Iranian oil. And when China gets hurt economically, those ripple effects are felt by every country on the planet. If we're going to look at some positives here, the United States is the largest exporter of LNG, and we had almost none. We were exporting almost none in 2015. So now that we amount to about 20% of the global LNG trade, there's a real leverage there for our country. And part of that's because we had this shale revolution from about 2008 to 2012. We learned how to frack. We started fracking in Texas, and that's a horizontal form of extracting gas. And what we do is we freeze it down into a form that we can bottle up, and then we export it. And talking about Germany, we've been doing that for Germany for years now, in particular after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. And I think as you and I were just sort of chatting before we came on, Russia had become dependent on a single state, Germany had become dependent on a single state supplier, which was Russia. And so when Germany decided it was going to end its nuclear program, then it became dependent on Russia's liquefied natural gas, Russia's LNG. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, oops, what was Germany going to do? It was dependent on its enemy, and it was trying to support Ukraine, but was dependent on Russia. And so it had to turn to Norway and the United States to fill in the gap. And that shows the dangers of being dependent on a single state supplier. And it's a warning lesson to the United States that we do need to be energy independent. And, we've been a net energy exporter since 2019, and that's great. We've got people all over the world buying our oil, buying our liquefied natural gas. We're the number one oil producer in the world. We're the number one gas producer in the world. We're also the largest exporter of LNG. So we've got all these really good things going for us on the energy front. And that's why, even though the places like Europe and China are really feeling the pain from the Strait of Hormuz being closed, we're not feeling it to the same degree.
Yeah, I saw an article, I think it was on Red State the other day, and it was talking about how things in America, the prices are higher, but they're not as bad as other places. It's not as bad. Gas is not as expensive as it is in Europe or other places. Now, when I read that, Alan, my first thought was, yeah, that's like saying, sure, we got punched in the face 3 times, but they got punched in the face 6 times, so we're doing a lot better. My thought was, if you really want to make it more affordable in America, say in the Northeast, up in Canada, or up in Alaska, out in Hawaii, if you really want to lower gas prices, let's get rid of the Jones Act. And I don't know if that's the direction you're ready to go, but the fact that it is sometimes cheaper to ship oil to Europe than it is to the Northeast bothers me a great deal.
Well, I'll tell you another thing is, under the Biden administration, there were all these environmental regulations in place that really prevented the refinement and production of oil. And that was a huge problem because, we were restricting our own capacity to provide energy. And it was for sort of, flaky environmental reasons that don't really have sound support in the science, speaking of follow the science. But one really interesting dynamic right now that I am not sure how it will play out is the situation in Venezuela, because Venezuela has the largest oil reserves on the planet. And our refineries are built for heavy crude. And that's what Venezuela produces. It's not exporting jet fuel and things like that, already refined stuff. But our refineries are built for refining crude. And we have a new dynamic. We have a new relationship with Venezuela, with investment from United States companies. Could we see barrels climbing back? I mean, at the peak in the 2000s, Venezuela was producing over 3 million barrels a day. And that shot way down because Venezuela was a socialist country. It didn't have infrastructure. It couldn't refine. It was selling at a discounted rate to China. And it was under sanctions. I mean, we had sanctions imposed on Venezuela. But now the dynamic is very different. So maybe it's possible for us to start partnering with Venezuela. I think the biggest loser on the world stage right now is not Germany, like we talked about earlier, but it really is China. I mean, China was reliant on Middle Eastern oil, but it was also getting oil from Venezuela. So the two places where it was getting its most oil are now, compromised. We'll put it that way. And, I think we're forcing China to build all these massive stockpiles, but that's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. I know China has more shale deposits than we do, but they're in very arid climates, and they don't have the technology to frack the way we do. And it's hard to get to these remote areas where the shale is. So China has not developed a liquefied natural gas program the way we have. And so that's good for us, bad for China.
Yeah, they'll steal that technology soon enough, more than likely. But I want to go back to, if you could talk about Venezuela for a bit, because I think these are great case studies for people to look at, because Venezuela was a socialist country, and we keep hearing calls from the collectivists here in the United States for more central planning, for more top-down solutions. You look at what collectivism